We are proud to have Remitly on board as our headline sponsors until the World Test Championship final in June. When it comes to family, no matter how far away they are, they're always close to our hearts. Perhaps it's why millions of people trust Remitly to send money worldwide. It's easy to send money quickly, safely, and affordably. And with Remitly's great exchange rates and low fees, more of the money you send reaches the people who matter most. Because at the end of the day, family is everything. Download the Remitly app today and enjoy a special offer on your first transfer. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. England start the Test summer with a resounding innings victory over Zimbabwe at Trent Bridge. We'll be talking about the Test match, the start of the England International White Ball Summer, the County Championship, and more across the show. I'm Rana, and with me today are Ben Gardner and the Telegraph's Will Macpherson. But first, let's hear from Mark Butcher. Butcher, really important week for Shoaib Bashir. 9 wickets in total, including 6 in the second innings. What did you like about his performance?
Well, much the same as I've liked it in previous, last summer in particular, when he had it going nicely, was that he has all of the attributes that you'd want, right? So he has a really good amount of overspin, drop, can get the ball to drift, will turn the odd one sharply, and really the only issue for him is that control element. It really is incredible just how different a bowler he becomes when Stokes is captain, or i.e. when he's playing for England. The numbers on, even when playing for England when Stokes is not captain, is kind of like he's half as good. But when he finds a little bit of consistency and control, he's very, very dangerous indeed. There was a moment during the Test match, I think his first, 4 or 5 overs, where he was almost bowling like a left arm seamer. I did a piece on TV about the difference in his action between when the ball comes out with that sort of loop and drop and everything, and when it doesn't. The first 3 or 4 overs he bowled, I think he was bowling a full toss, at least one full toss and over, bowling sort of unintentional Yorkers, dragging the odd ball down, had absolutely no control over length whatsoever. And then he bowls a delivery that gets rid of Craig Irvine in the first innings, which just is an absolute jaffer. Drifts into the left-hander, drops on him, gets him to push forward, then turns, nicked, caught, slip. And from that moment on, the control of length was so much better. 80% better than it had been. And it's a difference in his action between sort of releasing the ball with his sort of head down, almost sort of like left arm seamer style, or releasing it with his head up and getting sort of the way that makes a difference in terms of controlling length is when the head is down, you're sort of guessing the release point a little bit, and the ball ends up coming out sort of flat trajectory, hence the long balls and the short balls. But then as a spinner, if you're using your head almost as something to bowl against, like a fulcrum to bowl against with your head up, then suddenly the ball starts to come out and you understand exactly where the release point is, and you can make your variations from there. And once he bowled that delivery, that it was like chalk and cheese, like 2 completely different bowlers on the park. So it was impressive. All of the good things about Shoaib Bashir were on show over the course of that Test match, and all of the indifferent things about him were on display during that Test match. And if we can get a little bit more of the good, then England have no issue.
What do you think it is about Bashir bowling with Stokes that seems to make such a difference? Because as you say, the numbers are stark. Is it how he makes him feel? Is it the confidence he gives him? Or are there more practical things like how he sets a field up for Bashir? I get the sense that you watch some of the best spinners in the country, and when they start a spell in the Championship, for example, they often will start with no men on the boundary at all. But whereas Bashir for England isn't treated in the same way. There's more acknowledgement that there is going to be a bad ball. And then perhaps even if his accuracy isn't quite there, he's not leaking runs in the same way as other captains might have him do with less protection.
Yeah, I think, there's obviously a confidence issue, isn't there? But when you think about his age and his total lack of experience, really, that sympathetic captaincy to get him into a spell. I mean, don't forget also that often in his time as an England captain, England have scored a lot of runs quickly, and so therefore it isn't quite so important that he goes at 2.5, 3 runs and over. Stokes is quite happy for all his bowlers, it seemed, during the course of the Test match, and quite rightly, to sort of go at fours and not worry about it and keep pushing for wickets. So, the match situations and the relative dominance in a match plays quite a big part in that sympathetic field placing. But I don't know. I mean, just some people gain great sort of strength and confidence from the people they're surrounded by or captained by. And it appears at the moment, in this early stage in Bashir's career, he needs that reassurance of Stokes by his side as captain.
Hundreds to Duckett, Crawley and Pope, especially well timed for Crawley and Pope, who came into and probably still leave this test not totally assured of their places in the side for the start of that India series. With Bethell's imminent return, what do you think will happen there?
I'm really not sure. I couldn't tell you. I mean, we've had this conversation so many times. I think the idea that Crawley would suddenly find himself out of the 11 is almost laughable. I think he plays. Pope's position perhaps is not quite as assured. However, they've both done themselves no end of good in scoring runs, albeit it felt like a glorified net at times on day one. Very little threat from Zimbabwe, who had a very poor day on day one in terms of just any sort of semblance of control and consistency. But yeah, I mean, the problem is for Bethell, I suppose, is that if the incumbents are making runs and you're not there, they have a great opportunity and took it to make it difficult to leave them out. So look, I don't know is the answer. Maybe England have got a plan and have had it all along as to what exactly is going to happen, but we're not privy to that as yet.
Stokes accused the media of having an agenda against Ollie Pope. Do you think that it's a little bit harsh how much scrutiny there is over Pope's place in the side, given the average is more than 40 at three? He's got as many hundreds at three as Jonathan Trott did. He actually had a very good series against New Zealand at the end of the winter, scored 3 Test hundreds last year. It feels unusual for an England player with that recent record to be under as much fire as Pope is currently.
Yeah, I mean, and also, he's done a lot of different gigs, hasn't he? I mean, ever since going up to 3, as you say, his numbers have been very good. But in the midst of that, he's also batted at 6 and kept wicket and captained the team and all sorts of stuff. So he's an incredibly valuable member of that England dressing room. At least they absolutely see it that way. And some people just don't seem to don't seem to have any confidence in him or don't seem to like him very much. But I think that's pretty harsh. It certainly isn't. Certainly not in the same category of scrutiny that Crawley gets, or deserves, I guess. Ollie Pope has very rarely sort of gone through long sways of time where he hasn't scored a run. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that he played one of the most extraordinary innings of all time to win a Test match in India. So look, he I think is under less pressure, which therefore means that the path in for Bethell, particularly as far as England are concerned, is not a straightforward one. But as I said, they work in mysterious ways sometimes, and more often than not, they kind of end up being proved right. So we'll have to wait and see what they decide to do.
And just quickly on Brian Bennett, what an amazing innings that was. 21-year-old Zimbabwean opener, second Test 100. I genuinely thought there's a lot of Babar Azam in how he shaped up and how well he timed the ball. There was one punch down the ground where it was no more than just a push. And you initially watch it on the highlights and you're like, that's just a defensive shot. And then you realise it's run away for 4 down to long on.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. I mean, Sean Williams played a few similarly in the second innings. It looked like they were going to be trading fastest hundreds for Zimbabwe over the course of 2 innings in a Test. What a brilliant moment. His family there, amazing support for Zimbabwe all round as well, I think is worth mentioning. I think there was, great colour and enthusiasm and vibrancy from them. It was really great to see. as you would see anytime if you went to Harare Sports Ground to watch them play. It is one of the great experiences in a cricket ground to watch the support for Zim. And I mean, the brilliant thing is Zimbabwe get the chance to play another 6 or 7 Test matches during the course of the year. They will only be better for it. Blessing Muzarabani proved, I think, over the course of, particularly after the second new ball at the end of day 1 and the early part of day 2, that he is he's a class act. And they have a lot of very, very good players, and some of them are extremely young, right at the beginning of their career. Bennett being the prime example. So it'd be fantastic to see how they shape up. And of course, as with everybody in this at this level of the game, the more exposure to it they get, and the more regular Test match cricket they play, the better they'll become. I got a question for you.
Go on.
Sam Cook, how do you think he went?
Ooh, I think he did fine. Mm-hmm. I think that I wonder if he's not the player that really fits what England are trying to do. So, in the cap presentations, so Stuart Broad did a really, really amazing one. I think it's quite cool to see how seriously the players who give the caps do it. And in it, he says what everyone says when they give a cap is keep doing what you've been doing, keep doing what got you this cap. And he didn't really, because his job at Essex is to go at 2 runs and over. And if the ball's not doing a lot, his value is that after 20 overs, he's 3 for 60. And that's not really what this England side ever tried to do. There was a bit in the second innings where he was bowling bumpers. And I was like, I wonder if he has ever done this for Essex. And I think he did fine. I think his figures look worse than he actually bowled. There were a lot of runs that went through the slips. And obviously England had always looked to attack. But I think he did fine. I was really happy for him. But I wonder if he's the guy for this current regime. I don't know. What do you think?
That is pretty much. I mean, there were periods there I was watching. I was kind of thinking, okay, how and why, given perhaps an option like even Matthew Potts, who was obviously there in the squad, as to how Cook would long term sort of be the answer to take the new ball perhaps in front of him. I think what it did, and whether this was the intention or not, and I rather mischievously suggested that it might have been, that for the key McCullum Stokes axis to kind of to have said, here you go, here's your non 85 mile an hour plus fast bowler who's got fabulous numbers and by dint of those numbers deserves a spot. But here's why we haven't been that keen on picking them, because in Test matches on very, very flat Test pitches, you need a little bit more than what is successful on a regular basis at county level. And I wonder if we saw that with our own eyes. And that is not to say that tension, bit of nerves, bit of all of the rest of it making your debut, it didn't play a part in the fact that Sam Cook looked at times a little innocuous. But the speed gun doesn't lie, and it was down at 76, 77 miles an hour outside of his sort of opening spell. So that's something to mull upon.
I also wonder as well with this England regime, they picked so many young guys who I think they feel like they can mould. And Sam Cook is much more ready-made. This is what he is. He knows what he is, and that has its pros and cons. And I also think more generally that there's much more media chat about who's going to be in that top 3 for the India series. But I think far more importantly for how England fare in the next 10 tests is actually how the bowlers go. I thought it was interesting how expensive England were against Zimbabwe. I know it was flat. I know the outfield was rapid. But if you look at England versus India, England versus Australia at the moment, the stark difference between the teams is the experience in the seam bowling lineup. England are going to start that Test summer against India, who are going to have Bumrah in that side. England are going to have potentially Gus Atkinson as the most experienced seamer. Maybe Wokes is back fit. Who knows? But that's the real difference. And I think the real unknown about England at the moment is how their bowlers go and how they fare compared to India and Australia.
Yeah. I mean, that's a terrific point. I mean, Atkinson Tongue had moments where they looked pretty good, and others where a very inexperienced or a very callow Zimbabwe batting lineup sort of took them to the cleaners a little bit. So worth keeping an eye on.
Absolutely. Anyway, that's it for this week. Cheers for your time, Butch. See you next time. a reminder that we've been extremely, perhaps disturbingly busy on the old Patreon this week. We've had 28 episodes in May alone. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, you get 2 extra weekly shows a week, 2, and you get dailies after every day of England international cricket. And sometimes there are 2 days of English international cricket on the same day. My social life is falling apart. Help us out. You can get involved from just £5 a month plus VAT. All the links are in the description as usual. Will, first test of the summer. What do you think from a performance point of view for England?
It was job done, wasn't it? And it was probably it probably went about as I expected it to go, if you see what I mean. It was good. I think that the top 3, and especially Zach Crawley and Ollie Pope, got hundreds. Particularly with Crawley, he's just not a guy at any stage of his career who's regularly made hundreds, and therefore we shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. If Zach Crawley scores a Test 100 for England, we should be appreciating it as a good start to the summer, and probably one which quietens a little bit of noise. There's obviously going to be a bit of speculation in the next 3 or so weeks before they play India about whether he and Pope both hold their spots. I think they will now, but I'm sure we'll get onto that a bit later. Bowling wise, maybe slightly a bit more concerning. Like England, it was a very flat pitch. It was Trent Bridge is a fast scoring ground. Whatever happens, it was really parched outfield. So runs were going to flow, and most people who got in scored at pretty close to a run of ball. Bennett, Duckett, Williams, Pope as well, who you wouldn't normally associate with scoring quite as quickly as he did. So there is, I have sympathy for England's bowlers because of that. But yeah, the 3 frontline seamers, I was maybe slightly disappointed with all 3 in different ways. Cook, because he's just got such an amazing record, and I was really excited to see how that step up would translate. And the figures will suggest he didn't bowl great. I actually thought he bowled absolutely fine, but without maybe that kind of X factor. He wasn't as relentless maybe as if his super strength or his X factor is consistently seeing relentlessness, he wasn't quite there. Tongue, I was really excited about because he just looked so good for Nottinghamshire this season, and maybe didn't quite hit those heights as well. And Atkinson, I watched both his county games for Surrey at Hove and against Somerset, and he looked to really have that zip back and kind of the flick in his wrist, which I think he lost a little bit towards the end of last year. And so none of them were maybe as effective as they could be, but maybe this is a tune-up on a really flat pitch, and they'll be better for it.
Ben, just on a human level, really pleasing to see Crawley and Pope get those hundreds under quite a lot of pressure coming into this Test match, a lot of chat around their positions in the side.
Yeah, I guess on a human level. It's funny how Will says it sort of eases a bit of pressure and conversation, whereas I only think it's like in some ways heightened it. And it's so weird that hundreds in this game, especially, Pope playing in Div 1, Crawley, is facing some good bowls in Div 2. Actually, like this shouldn't change really anything about how England view their quality as players. And yet it's just the impact of a Test match 100 means that you can't drop someone after they've made one, especially when they are, the incumbent in the side. It's such a strange situation. But yeah, I mean, it's almost on a human level of thinking about what the reverse would have been. Pope, he sliced one sort of just wide of Gully quite early on. He was sort of wrapped on the pads. First ball, like it was never out. But like if that goes a little bit differently, then that would have been like an absolutely terrible moment. As it is, it's a 100 that they will feel pretty pleased with having made. But
yeah, sorry just to interrupt, but it's like the cost of failure would have been extremely high, but the benefit of success is just retention probably, and then the next time they fail, it's kind of the pressure's on again. So
exactly,
strange one.
And it's a whole weird situation with both of them, where Pope you sort of felt was the more under pressure. Obviously, we talked about loads, but having had decent series actually last time in New Zealand, whereas it was Crawley who was sort of getting blown off all the time, and then just such a whole weird situation around those two, around where the pressure is, and trying to read the runes, as we're going to get onto, of what like the numbers say and what England is saying, and actually reading between the lines of what England is saying and how that can kind of go wrong. So given all that going on, they will just feel very relieved, I think, to have made runs more than anything else.
Charlie asks, if you could pick one, would you go for Murali or Shoaib Bashir when he's bowling for the Radcliffe Road End? Shoaib Bashir, with his second fifer at Trent Bridge, became the youngest English bowler to 50 Test wickets. He averages 32 under Stokes, 65 under Pope, and 83 from 15 non-Test first-class games. Why does it work so much better with Stokes?
It is bizarre, isn't it? I mean, the non-Test first-class stuff and the Test average must be the widest gap that way for someone who has 50.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It can't be
must
worse.
be double than anyone else. It's so wild. He is completely. It is really bizarre. With him, Stokes has obviously got some kind of. I mean, one thing I'd say about Stokes is with all of his bowlers, he's very happy to buy a wicket. He's very happy for a bowler to be hit for 3 sixes if it means the fourth one is skewed up in the air. Whereas, so he's very persistent in his captaincy. And Bashir spoke last week about England cricket being his happy place, and Stokes and McCullum making him feel 10 foot tall, which is actually what they say they want to do with all of their players. That's kind of their little line. But it clearly, more than anyone else, it works with him. He gets him into the game so much earlier than you would ever see a county captain do. The Pope thing is interesting. When Pope was captain, obviously, he captained those 4 games, 3 against Sri Lanka, and then the first in Pakistan while Stokes was still injured. And you could sort of tell in that Sri Lanka series, I watched most of that series on TV, actually, because I was off on paternity leave, but you could see that Pope just didn't quite know how to get Bashir into the game in the way that Stokes has always just. It seems so easy to Stokes. He knows when to use him and when not to. Bashir has had a couple of. I think here last year against West Indies, he had a pretty much TFC, didn't he? And wasn't involved at all. And one or two other games like that. But when Stokes gets him in the game, he really, really gets him in the game. He came on first change, didn't he, in Nottingham, and he was also just able to lock him in from that end and just keep him going. It's been lucky. I think the dry start to the summer produced a very dry place at the dry pitch and ground at Trent Bridge, which helped him. But actually, the county games he played were weeks and weeks ago now, so maybe he wouldn't have benefited from them. But it can't be easy. I get why Somerset have got the pecking order they have, but it can't be easy just popping into a dressing room for a game or two here or there.
Yeah, when it's less dry at the start of the season, the role for a spinner really in county cricket is to just not go for runs. And if you bowl 25 overs for 60 and you pick up a couple of wickets in that time, you've done your job. Bashir, even when he's bowling well, is not that. And it might actually just be that being the England #1 spinner under Ben Stokes is asked for a different set of attributes to being a county spinner. And I think that is partly it. Ben, Stokes bowled really well. Really well. That is very encouraging. I can't remember the last time he'd have bowled up at 85 mile per hour.
Yeah, I was trying to remember, because he took a few wickets in, I think, the last test in New Zealand right before his hamstring went. But again, I don't think it's still just felt different watching him this time. And I know there were people who look at things like, well, it was 3 wickets against Zimbabwe. It's not like he got through a massive volume of overs, but especially that spell in the first innings, which was really short. That was just 3.2 overs. And
also from a standing start.
Yeah, exactly.
Ridiculous. Like pure Stokes, isn't it? It's just absurd.
Yeah. Who writes the scripts? Yeah. but yeah, and I guess also talking about how England's other seamers went, that was actually something that put that into contrast. And you see actually how well-rounded Stokes is a bowler at his best, that he can do every role actually you would kind of want him to. He actually in a different lifetime would have taken the new ball for England and would have swung it loads. And then actually when it's reverse swinging, there's kind of no one better. He can put the heat on at times, or he can bowl those spells of bounces that he likes to ask his bowlers to bowl so much. In that first instance, there was one, I think it was reverse swing that just came back in miles, and then one where it just gets that lift that you don't really know where it's come from. So yeah, hugely encouraging that he is right back on that in his first bowl of the year, basically. But yeah, as Will said, I guess it is interesting comparing that to England's other teams. And then if I guess talking about that bouncer thing as well, which just interesting seeing Sam Cook being asked to do that. And then when we talk about the relentlessness, he probably will have never bowled a massive spell of bouncers before, and yet he's doing it in a test match, and it's it's an odd situation. Yeah.
I sort of think with Stokes the bowler, he's become more of a point of difference in the wobble seam era, because he tries to do the same things he did 10 years ago, and he really does swing it loads. He gets the ball to talk more than other English seamers, and in the post-Anderson era, I know Anderson became more of a seamer than a swinger towards the end. I think is he gives England something a little bit different.
I'd love to see him actually take the new ball at some stage this
Yeah.
year. And the reason that is, I think it's a bizarre English thing where in the post-Anderson transition, a lot of the bowlers England are putting a lot into actually don't want or need the new ball. So you look at Carse, Tongue, Wood, none of them would be a new ball attack, but a new ball specialist. But I could easily see that being England's attack for the first test in Perth. And if you need someone to take the new ball and you've got those four as your seamers, well, maybe 4 overs of Ben Stokes up top is the most sensible way to use him. And then see you later in the innings.
Yeah, I mean, Atkinson has become a new ball bowler for England, but that is absolutely not what
And
he
he's
did
not a
before.
traditional new ball bowler, is
Exactly.
he? It's like sort of, three-quarter seam. And it is strange that England have got that, which is, I think, why they wanted a look at Cook so much, because he is a new ball specialist.
I've actually got a theory, and I'll try and find out if the numbers bear this out. I think there is something about the batch of Dukes this year where new ball bowlers are doing less well. I don't think it's swinging at all in the first 10 overs. If you look at like guys who traditionally hoover up wickets in the championship,
Worrell and Cook being the first two, yeah.
Cook, Ollie Robinson being the other one.
Nathan Smith
They've all
last year,
done.
yeah.
They've all had good seasons. They've not had great seasons. And also, I think comparable to 2022, the number of ball changes that are happening is so much. You're seeing balls change at 15, 20 overs into an inning. So I wonder if there's something in that as well.
And just when because you showed me how to get all the county cricket notifications on my app, which is both a blessing and a curse. But when that round of games starts at Friday, you're like looking at your phone thinking like, hang on, is there rain around? What's going on? It's like you'll see 3 wickets fall across the country in the first hour, and then actually they'll start coming a bit more steadily. But I think there's something.
Yeah, Surrey, like it's almost like a guarantee now that they just give the opposition 100 for none off 20 overs as well. So we're not talking like slow and steady. They just let them fly out the box, and then they're 220 all out.
Well, there was one round a few weeks ago where by midday there wasn't a wicket in the first hour in Division 1. And it has been a trend throughout the season. Again, the flip side of that is if you look at the leading run scores in the country, loads of openers. Will, there was a mini media storm over comments Ben Stokes made before the test match. He said, if you're smart enough, the series that Beth had out in New Zealand, obviously he's going to be back in the UK for that India series. So I think you can put 2 and 2 together. You probably know what's going to happen. Some outlets reported that meant that Bethell's presence in the 11 for the India series was basically confirmed. Stokes later clarified he meant squad and not 11, and he also claimed that the media's reporting of his quotes suited the current agenda. Is there an agenda?
I don't think there is an agenda. I don't think there's... I think the media generally, not just cricket media, but maybe sports media more widely, does like a shiny new toy, which Jacob Bethell would fit under that category at the moment, wouldn't he? But I'm happy to explain what I was one of the people who reported things in that way. What it was. So you have a press conference before the game, and then afterwards he spends maybe 10 minutes just chatting exclusively to the written media, and then those quotes are embargoed until slightly later in the day than the live stuff in the press conference. And Stokes was asked by Ali Martin from The Guardian, and I think he sort of mentioned this in his piece over the weekend as well, but he was asked about Bethell coming back, and he used the expression the incumbent number 3 as the incumbent number 3. And I think all of us in the room, we all spoke about it afterwards, and we all felt that it was clear that he was talking about the 11, but Stokes clearly didn't, and there was a misunderstanding there, which I think we're happy to own. It wasn't willful. We weren't trying to create something from nothing. I think everyone read it in the same way. Different people reported it to different levels of strength. The thing I would say about it is I don't actually, the way I framed it, for instance, was that it placed Stokes and Crawley and Pope on kind of notice that this guy is coming back. And actually, whether it was the squad or the 11, if they had failed, we were talking about the heavy cost of failure. If they had failed, then Bethell would have had a very, very good chance of coming back into the 11. As it is, they both succeeded, and I think he'll only come back into the squad now. But I don't think it changed masses. But there's no agenda against Pope.
Do you think more generally, I'm interested in your overall view on the relationship between elite players and the media at the moment? I was watching the Test over the weekend, and there was just a throwaway line from Pat Cummins about how he viewed the media, and it was in quite negative terms. And I think actually one of the sources of this misunderstanding is Stokes giving a very defensive answer. And he gives quite a vague answer to a fairly specific question that has not been interpreted in the way that he wanted to. And Stokes has been pretty clear in the past about how he views portions of the media as well. Do you think that relationship is not potentially as strong as it might have been 5 years ago?
I actually think with Stokes, I have to take the opposite view. I think I'm only old enough to have covered 3 England Test captains kind of properly. So I did the very tail end of Cook's time, and then most of Roots and the whole of Stokes. And Stokes is the one who is the most natural media operator of those 3, but he's also the one who's owning it the most and appears to be giving the most to it. And we are really grateful for that. And I hope we have that the kind of misunderstanding last week doesn't kind of make him go into his shell with us. But especially last year, when we were on the tour of India last year, he really went out of his way to give proper explanations about why they'd done things, and we were kind of having these sort of poolside chats 2 days out of the hotel where there's 10 of us and 1 of him, and all the feedback from him personally and from England's kind of the England side was that he was enjoying this, and he was like enjoying the opportunity to get his message across about how he wanted this team to go and all that kind of stuff. So I actually think the relationship is pretty positive. I'm sure there are elements of the way the media operates, whether that's just in cricket or more widely, that he finds extremely irritating. And he likes to remind us when we use words that he doesn't like ruthlessness and things. He says, that's just an outcome-based thing. You'll say we're ruthless if we happen to have run through a team, and you'll say we weren't ruthless if we toiled in the field for hours. But when actually our effort or what we're doing is no different. So I do think largely it's a positive relationship. I also have a sense if Stokes was really, really, really pissed off last week, he would have taken to social media to use the he's got that in him even the night before a game. So instead he went and clarified his comments to Pope. And I do think from what I understand, he sort of understood that when he saw the quotes written down, he sort of understood how the misinterpretation had happened, even if he did maybe say he thought we'd willfully done it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's also possibly here where there's different sections of the media that they might have maybe different relationships to. I think there's like the written press pack, who I think in this instance there's not almost not a lot that's gone wrong on both sides. In some ways, it is just a bit of misunderstanding. And also I think it comes from partly what Will's saying about how previous captains might have been more guarded. They would just give a straightforward answer. They would say, "Look, Bethell will come back into the squad and will make a decision on the 11 based on the squad that we pick," whereas Stokes has chosen not to. He said put 2 and 2 together and then
we've got 5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then also I guess so that's one bit of the media. Then there's also sort of the ex-player pundit section of the media, and I know that obviously some of these are Will's colleagues, but if you're looking at Pope in particular, I can see how if you're Stokes, you look at that and think like, hang on, why have they got it out for this guy? But I was just going because I was looking back through some of the coverage of various things and looking at like just after the New Zealand thing when Bethell came in, people saying like Pope has to go now kind of thing. And obviously some of that just comes out in headlines, but also if you're the England captain, you're not going to read all 800 words of everything that is written. You are going to go based on that. And that is kind of fair enough. And I can see how you see that. And also, there's some other stuff like, did Vaughan say that Pope's quite an insecure human being? Like I can see how if you're Stokes and you're friends with Pope and he's your vice captain and you clearly think this guy who could be in captain, has been in captain's guided England in some pretty memorable wins, that you see that and think like, hang on, what's going on here? And then the other aspect of it is the social media side of things. And I guess that there's how a whole press conference gets presented in like a written piece that goes in the newspaper, and then actually from outlets, and this will go for Wisden as well as for other newspaper outlets, like the graphification maybe of
go with it
of how these things come out, and also the headlinification, I guess, where what happens is maybe say Liam Livingstone is asked a question about how and when against Australia, and he'll say something like, I think we played a bit better than we did in other games, maybe we didn't deserve to lose, and then that's something that comes out, Livingstone, England deserved to lose against Australia, and then everyone on social media, you get loads of people piling in saying the same thing. And that's because you have a social media team who, they will say that, well, he said that, we've put that on a graphic. And then the players think like, yeah, but look at the result that's had. And they said, well, we're not the ones criticising, that's what everyone else is doing based on what you've said. And it's kind of the whole ecosystem that then feeds into an element of sort of like, well, we're just trying to say what we think, and you're taking the absolute worst bit of what we think and putting it on a graphic. And then it's like, well, that's what we've said, and now that's gone out. And it's a whole kind of, I think that's part of it as well. I think that they will feel that at times they have just tried to be open with people, and then people pick on the one thing, and then that's how that's the thing that gets taken away.
Well,
I guess
I think
it's a tricky situation.
It's a really broad point that applies to all media. Like when you're an outlet, you pump out lots of content, right? But what the players might see tends to be the things that have been amplified by how many
It's
people
the pointy
engage
end,
with it.
isn't it?
Exactly.
The stick, yeah.
Exactly. So I think quite a lot of the time the players probably only see some of the more negative things, not because the press are being overly negative. It's just because that's the stuff that tends to get more engagement online. Will, what were your thoughts on the test as a spectacle overall? I thought there was an element of slightly unfair dismissiveness over Zimbabwe after day one. I don't think people, you talked about how quick scoring a ground it was, and that was a big part as to why England scored millions, but also Zimbabwe lose their second best seamer just after lunch. That's always going to be difficult for any side, let alone a side that hasn't played a lot of test cricket. Nasser Hussain was in the Mail essentially calling for two-tier test cricket based on day one. And I'm like, got to be careful what you wish for that one, because if you're basing what should be played on the results in games, England shouldn't be playing many tests in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I thought that after day one, we actually, that Telegraph might surprise you, but we made a bit of a decision where we weren't going to judge the kind of the overall game by that day and just wait until at least been 2 days. And we were kind of glad we'd done that. And obviously it was a game that was won in 3 days by an innings with no doubt over the result from about lunchtime on day one, you'd say, or maybe after an hour of day one. We were always sort of certain of who would win that game, but I actually thought Zimbabwe equipped themselves pretty well. It was great that they had a couple of, well, in Brian Bennett, one fantastic story there, third 100 against England, were only their quickest one, and it looked like they might have their Jessup stuff over in about an hour and a half or a day and a half, with Williams going along nicely the next day. But yeah, I thought they did pretty well. It was possibly a better spectacle than I expected to be. I thought the occasion was good. I thought Trent Bridge, despite it's a bit of a shame that Trent Bridge is kind of under construction when it happened.
As well.
As for the start of a test summer, although that construction work has to happen at some stage, and I understand how it's happened. But I thought the Zimbabwe fans were absolutely incredible, especially on day 2 and 3. And yeah, it showed that there is a market for these games, and that they should happen. Whether they should happen every 22 years, it's probably not going to help them as a spectacle moving forward. So I think there is, and I know it's happening. We did a piece over it on the weekend on it about this slot in the 5 test summers, this kind of early, or there's 5 test series summers. So the India, Australia summers, the odd summers, 23, 25, 27, what England do before them. There's kind of up for debate at the moment, I think, and they're trying to work it out, and they might move back to a 2-test model. It sort of depends whether the World Test Championship stays in the UK, which I think it should, but I'm a bit biased on that. So, yeah, this slot is up for debate. The Ireland, I thought Zimbabwe, in many ways, were a better kind of advert for it than Ireland were a couple of years ago. You might remember when they didn't play Josh Little because they said it wasn't a pinnacle event and all those kind of, I think that maybe frustrated a few people around the English game. Whereas Zimbabwe, you had, I know we'll get on to Sikandar Raza, and it's pretty crazy what happened, and I don't love it, but in a way it shows what he was giving up to come and bother to play the game, because he knew this was an event and a moment in his career. So it did really matter to them and their fans, and yeah, I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule each summer, not just is a general thing, but is an impossible job. But you do look at it and think, like, hang on, it's a bank holiday yesterday, and this was a 4-day test that was always had a chance of being a 3-day test. Why we starting on a Thursday rather than a Friday? That was a bit odd at the time, and it was that Thursday crowd which was the slightly more worrying as well. Just looking at the stands, I guess if we're looking at like the schedule thing more general, and also the 2-division Test cricket thing. One thing with 2-divisional Test cricket is that, I've said this before, but in principle, it is not a terrible idea, because it could mean, obviously Zimbabwe are a special case given how much Test cricket they're playing this year, but there would be a way in an ideal world that you structure it so that actually the smaller teams play more Test cricket because of it, and you then have a pathway for teams who don't currently have Test status to get into that second division and maybe push for the first division. The thing is that teams look at actually how these what that would actually mean, and they would just see it as actually a way just to consign them and mean that the top teams never have to play them and just basically forget about them, rather than actually being like a thing done with that principle behind it. And just is a sort of sad thing about how the game is sort of run on the whole. Like, even, you know, we talked about the WTA report, and that is in some ways quite an idealistic thing about what it says about how all cricket should have context, but that advocates for 2 divisional test cricket
and 1 test match series.
Well, yes, yeah, exactly.
But this could have been in theory, could have been a WTC series.
Yeah.
On there.
Well, your favourite point is that Shawshank Redemption isn't one of the great film series of all time. It's just a great film.
But then the other thing is, if we're talking about World Championship having a minimum of 3 test series, which I think some people are quite keen on, is that it's also really unclear how that would fit into English summers, given how much England like playing 5 test series against Australia and now India as well, whereas England have basically never played 8 home tests in a summer. So how does that fit in as well?
And also 8 home tests in summer is just now going to be impossible because of 100, with August essentially being blocked out. We're playing Test cricket in August for the first 4 days, I think, this year, and then it goes for 100. So, and last year they played at the end of August. It's not, August isn't a completely non-Test cricket month, but I think in the medium term, what we're looking at in England is June and July. How many tests can they squeeze into those 2 months? Because August is off limits. I think they'll go to a white ball month in September. And then the IPL will end at a similar time to what it does now. And I think English cricket the IPL will expand, right? Everyone expects that to lengthen. I think everyone in English cricket is sort of holding its breath that
which way it goes.
But it goes backwards into March because of the weather in India. The more you get into June, being kind of incompatible with lots and lots of cricket. So complicated, but I think that's where we're sort of headed, that England would, all their test cricket really will be played in June and July.
That's it for part 2. In part 3, Sikandar Raza, the England West Indies ODIs and the County Championship. So Tom asks, how and more specifically, who can act when it comes to the fast school situation, re Raza and the PSL? So if you missed it, Sikandar Raza played a starring role in the PSL final, which is great, but it happened to be on the day 4 of the test match that ended on day 3. Essentially, Raza legged it from Nottingham to Pakistan via Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and was still in the taxi, apparently, when the toss was done and he was named in the 11. I think the point you made about how willing he was to potentially sacrifice playing in the PSL final when he's a big part of what Lahore do, to play a test match is a completely valuable one. But this can't have been a plan that was concocted on the 3rd evening of the test match. And should there be safeguards in place to prevent a player potentially being incentivised for a game to end early to pick up money elsewhere? This is slightly different in terms of, you could see the desire was to win a trophy, but there may be times when that is just to pick up a pay packet.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, you see it all the time, right? You had the BPL game that James Vince, Andre Russell, and one other, Tim David, like, they played one game in the BPL in the Eliminator, having been, I think, ended the tournament the previous week. This happens all the time. I guess in this instance as well, you have the fact that the PSL was pushed back by a bit. Like, there wasn't originally supposed to be a clash between these two, and then it was because of obviously the conflict and then the ceasefire. So that is one of the things that you can in principle say lots of things that when you then actually come up against the realities of how world cricket ends up playing out, it gets a bit more complicated. Like, you can say, okay, we need international windows, and then we need, I guess, franchise windows. But then you get to the question of, what do international windows look like? What are teams doing if they're not playing international cricket and also not playing franchise cricket? I think there is a feeling actually among players actually that they wouldn't mind some regulation around this. Like, I don't think players are that happy with the situation either. They are making use of it. They're not going to unilaterally say, well, I'm going to not sign up for another competition when I've just been knocked out of one, because they'll see other guys doing it and think like, well, I could earn this money. But if there was a rule that came in blanket and said, if you sign up for a competition, you have to be available for the whole of that competition, or if you're an internationally eligible cricketer and you get picked for a series, you have to be available for the whole of that series. And there's a way that kind of all fits together, so it's not denying players too much opportunity one way or the other. I think players would actually be fine with that, the thing is who is going to make that decision, especially, you know, the ICC, that there isn't leadership there kind of by design, basically. And that then leads to situations such as this one, basically. So that the solution out of it is to have like a pretty radical sit down and say, let's kind of almost start from scratch and say, what do we want this to look like? Which there have been some attempts to do, as we've kind of discussed in the podcast before, but the IC don't seem that keen to do that, especially because I guess the current situation it affects basically everything other than India almost. Like India actually do get their window pretty much completely, with a slight exception this year, again, with it being pushed backwards a bit, and their players don't play any franchise cricket, so their players are never having the situation where they're leaving from one competition going to another because they're not playing them at all. So for India it works, and they basically have the say over how everything how the whole thing is set up. So if the solution isn't going to help India, then there's not going to be a solution, basically, I think.
England start their one-day series against West Indies on Thursday, which feels really early. There's not enough gaps in the schedule. It is loosely relevant to England's, actually no, directly relevant to England's bid to qualify automatically for the 2027 ODI World Cup. So basically, the top 8 teams plus South Africa qualify. Top 8 teams in the rankings qualify automatically for the World Cup. England are currently 8th. West Indies are in 9th, just below them. And Bangladesh in 10th aren't that far behind and have a series against Sri Lanka coming up. And Sri Lanka are actually 4th in the ranking. So if Bangladesh win that, they'll get a pretty significant boost. The ranking cutoff time for this qualification isn't for ages, but you never know. And it's the sort of thing you want to be safe.
It's not also the West Indies at home is not a sort of series you want to lose if you're trying to qualify for something. They haven't qualified for the last World Cup, so all the Challenge Trophy.
That is true. We talked about what the series will mean from an England point of view on last week's show. But Ben, do you want to tell us about what West Indies have been up to recently? They've been playing Ireland. Yeah,
they have, and it was a weird series between two teams that you suspect were quite well matched, and yet had the first game Ireland pull off their biggest ever win against a full member side. They made 325, bowled West Indies out front of 200. Second game was washed out halfway through, and then West Indies put in an even more comprehensive victory in the third game, making nearly 400 and then bowling Ireland out again for 185 or something. I guess the headline from, if you're looking at that England-West Indies series and looking for players to watch, is Kia Sikandar, who actually he made 100, I think, against England at the end of last year, and is just in brilliant form in ODI cricket. He's got, I think, 300s in his last 7 ODIs, two in a row to end this series. And actually, although this series, was against Ireland, who also went in that last World Cup, but before that, he just had averaging 70 since the start of last year. And in that time, they've played Australia, Sri Lanka, England, and Bangladesh, and then also Ireland now. So actually, they're playing pretty good teams, and he's doing well pretty much across the board. And he's just a fun player to watch. Sort of like he's not one of these absolutely massive hitters, but he's got like a really good tempo to his batting. I think he could have a good time of it.
You not mention Matthew Ford's world record fastest ODI 50, equaling AB de Villiers' his record, 58 of 19, 2 4s, 8 6s. That's pretty handy. County cricket, we've got a break in the Championship, pretty much a month between the 7th and 8th round. The Blast kicks off later this week. JP asks, how do you view the first 7 games of the Championship as a block? Attendances, entertainment, pitches, etc. Well, for me, it's always one of my favourite times of the cricketing calendar because there's so much focus on the Championship. From an English cricket point of view, there's nothing else going on. You get more journalists at the games, more eyeballs on the streams, etc. This year, how did you see it?
I think it's been a good block. I think it's been, again, we mentioned the weather earlier, but it's been a really nice April and May, largely, hasn't it? Grey skies and rain on the window, but it's been good weather, which has really helped. I think it's been helped by, there's been some surprising stories. If you look at how the league tables are shaping up, I don't think anyone would have expected Lancashire to be in quite the state they're in. I think they're 1 point off the bottom of Div 2 now. And Kent, who started really well, have actually ones who've gone beneath them. And up there, you've got Leicester, Derby. Glamorgan are kind of resurgent all of a sudden, which caught me by surprise in May. Surrey, it's good to see them not having it all their way in Division 1. And I think Notts and Sussex being up there it's very interesting as well. So it's been a good block. It's still, it's not perfect, and the fact that the season's over, half over by the end of May is clearly not ideal. But I agree with you completely. It's a really fun time of year for county for county cricket, and the attention it gets and all that kind of stuff. It's been good.
I genuinely think, other than Yorkshire and Worcestershire, everyone in Division 1 still has a sort of has a shot at winning the thing. Although I think Notts look really good. They're only 10 points clear, but winning this week with Pennington back, because they were short on seamers after Tongue got picked for England. Basically, he might not play much at all for them for the remainder of the summer. Ollie Stone's out injured. So for them to get that win with Pennington doing well, but also bowling loads, I think is pretty significant. And also looking forward, spin typically plays more of a role in the second half of the championship compared to the first half. And they've got 3, Patterson White, Farhan Ahmed and Calvin Harrison, who's been brilliant
back,
at Northants as well. So I think they look the best placed side, and also their top 7 is very good, and none of them will play for England. Obviously Duckett's there, but he only played once this season.
And they don't actually need Duckett. They'd obviously be helped by Duckett. They've got Freddie McCann, who he replaced in the team. I've sort of from nowhere, Notts have become good. I feel like I do see them as real Red Bull underachievers over the last decade or so, and under Peter Moores it's been kind of a mixed bag, and I think there was a bit of kind of discontent among their support base last year about sort of they just survived, didn't they? But I think they only won 1 game. Or was it Warwickshire?
Well, I think Warwickshire won, Notts won 2.
2, yeah. They certainly, Lancashire went down having won 3. And they just didn't look a good side. And obviously there's all the talk about where they get their players. I think that's changing a bit. You look at it and like Lyndon James is a really solid county all-rounder, one of those classic county all-rounders. He's homegrown. Freddie McCann, Farhan Ahmed, all of them homegrown. That's just starting to change a little bit. I'm sure they'll remain in the market for players, but I think and they've been good at picking up overseas as well. Obviously, Fergus O'Neill was fantastic, but Carver Rayner just what a solid overseas. So you don't often see wicket keepers get county overseas gigs because most counties have one who's kind of a banker, but Notts don't. So they have Verena in it. I still, this weekend has made me doubt Surrey slightly. I thought they looked poor this weekend against Essex side, who they should beat at home. And Surrey's model is obviously going to be, they kind of need to win or come close to winning all their games at home and then try and scramble a win or 2 away from home, but not lose because everyone's rolling out very flat, slow pitches for them. But they didn't, the second half of this game at Essex, they were battling to avoid defeat rather than pushing to win it.
And Surrey have a poor record with the Kookaburra ball as well.
Yes.
And we've got 4 out of
and
7
they're very
remaining.
against it. They're like on record. Batty and Stewart are both on record as thinking it's a stupid idea and all that kind of stuff.
I think Surrey,
wrong reasons.
Yeah, as Surrey bowl and bat against spin not very well at the moment. Their lead spinner is Dan Lawrence. He missed this game, but
what was that injury? I saw you
back from the week
bowling
before.
too much.
He got it whilst batting, but who knows? I mean, he's bowled hundreds of overs from this season, and also Worrell and Clark have been their standout. They've got a great stable of quicks, but Worrell and Clark have been the standouts by miles. And Worrell, partly because of fitness, hasn't been quite as good as he has been in previous years. And those 2 guys are actually fairly old. They're approaching their mid-30s, and you think, even though they've got really good bowlers like Nathan Smith, Matt Fisher, etc., they're not quite the guys who blow teams away. And without having a spinner when it's flat, when the Kookaburra ball swings less, I can see them not picking up too many more wins.
It'll be interesting to see if any conversations are had with maybe, say, the touring Indian side, and if they manage to rope in someone like a Kuldeep Yadav, that would be an amazing overseas signing for September, especially with, I think that it's possible that a little hole opens up in that Indian calendar there now, given the Asia Cup might not be played. So if there is a gap in September and you can rope in someone like that, I just wonder if that comes in. Or, South Africa over, they've got a very good spinner as well. I wonder if there could be a little bit of if they might look to plug that gap, not from within, but looking outside.
It looks a big miss in their team at this stage. I know Cam Steele did a job early season last year and it's kind of sort of bits and pieces. That might be unfair, but bits and pieces. But I do think that was a time and a place kind of thing, and you need a bit more in your squad. If you look at across most county squads, because Shoaib Bashir's out of contract at the end of the season at Somerset, and it's sort of difficult to see him staying. But he's on an England contract. I suspect that England contract will be extended. But you look across the county game, and almost all counties do have someone to bowl their spin. like a serious person to bowl their spin, even if they don't pick them every week, a Matt Parkinson or a Mason Crane or Dawson or whatever. But Surrey are the one, and they're the one who don't, and they're the ones who have torn up county cricket for a couple of years.
So you think Bashir back to Surrey, maybe?
Well, you never know, do you? But I would suspect that whichever county signs Bashir won't actually have to pay for him because he'll be on an England contract, which might make him slightly more appealing. But it all comes back to the conversation we were having earlier about the difference between his England record and his county record. I mean, one big problem with Bashir at county level is he can't bat, and he'd be one of the worst fielders in a county 11. Whereas if you look at the way counties are setting their teams up increasingly, and this has been one of the fun things actually about the start of the season, is it increasingly like jack of all, which is what Surrey have done for a few years. But you look at Leicester are basically going for the Surrey model with how they're picking their I know they've shoved Rayan up to number 3, which buys them a spinner in the 11, and he's done well. But Somerset opening with 2, an all-rounder and a bowler, just to avoid kind of new ball threat or whatever it is. I don't know what they've said about the reasoning for that, but Bashir is difficult to get into a county 11 because he has to bat 10 or 11. And the games are played at times that don't suit him, and he's not a great fielder. So that will be interesting. But maybe.
On Leicester, by the way, they won again. They beat bottom of the table Lancashire by an innings, and Rana Ahmed batting at 3 scored 100, his second 100 of the season. They're going really well. And I also think quietly significant, maybe not for England in the immediate future, but Josh Hull is quietly doing pretty well for them.
Well, and that's the Wilson Leicester model. But if you go through the numbers, it is stark how many, they've got, I think 6 bowlers have taken 10 or more wickets. And actually one of the ones who hasn't is Rian Ahmed, who's still averaging 23 with the ball this summer. They use him as like a tail end sort of deadly weapon. It's great. Like again, we'll be like, oh, there's 2 wickets left to take. And there's, oh no, Rian Ahmed's got 2 for 1 basically. And that's how the game ends. And even with the bat, they've only got 3 guys averaging more than 40, but another 5 in the sort of 30 to 40 bracket. So kind of everyone is chipping in across the board. And it was a 24-point win as well against, I think Lancashire pick up 3 points from the game. So I mean, they look basically impossible. So I think 42 points, so almost like 2 full wins between them and third place
they
now.
Have
so
5 wins from 7. Yorkshire went up with 5 wins from 14 last season, so they're looking okay.
They look very good for it at this stage. Glamorgan are third with 97 points, and Leicester have got 139. So that's quite a nice cushion to have.
Well, you wrote a piece the other day talking about how the cricket regulator is taking interest in how county social media teams post about wickets and the sort of insinuation that umpires have got it wrong.
Yeah, it's a slightly random story, isn't it? But I don't think there's going to be a slew of charges and bringing the game into disrepute things dropping anytime soon. But I think it's an interesting development in sort of terms of the way the game is presented to the public and the kind of how umpires are treated across the game and where that all fits. You do see a bit of bait from county admins.
A judge
is kind of like, I don't think that's going to get you charged or whatever, but it might get you just a little reminder that is kind of loaded language around how umpires and so you do there are decisions that are poor. You see them like a lot of them go viral, and you see them all the time. But it's a difficult job umpiring at county level, and they are extremely accountable given the change over the last decade in streaming and social media clips and all those kind of things. They are so much more accountable than they once were, and they've got so much more scrutiny on them and judgment. So it will be interesting. Maybe nothing will come of it, but all the counties were kind of warned last week that just watch yourself when you're posting about this sort of stuff.
I think more generally, I think player behaviour is not at a good point at the moment. I think increasingly you're seeing players just not actually appeal for LBWs and caught behinds. And with the streaming, I know that in some cases it does highlight umpiring errors. But on the flip side, you've got decent cameras at a lot of ground. You see slow-mo replays and you just can't tell if the umpire's made a decision or not. And it's basically become the norm to a degree. And I don't know. I think maybe streaming's come into it. Maybe international players used to having DRS and not being able to use it, part of it. But I do think, I actually watched county cricket a fair bit this season and been like, that wouldn't be tolerated in a club game.
As fans, I think one of the things I always think about county cricket over the last decade is for I mean, as a kid growing up, I used to read the paper at home or wherever I could find one. And that's how I would consume county scores. And so there were various players who were, and I never went to county games. I grew up in Sussex, but didn't live very close to Hove. And like various players who were essentially like a figment of my imagination, if you know what I mean. Like I'd see their scores, I would know they were good.
Yeah.
I don't know, someone like Richard Montgomery used to open back in Sussex.
Great.
Now I had no idea what kind of play. I couldn't even really have told you whether he was tall or short or whatever, but I had consumed a lot of his stuff. Whereas now there's so much access to it. Everyone knows what everyone looks like. I mean, you go and watch a test match this weekend and you're so spoilt by umpiring because you just know the right result is going to end up happening. And you kind of, maybe as a test viewer, now watching all the county stuff, you just assume that you should be given the same service by umpires in the game, but you don't get it.
It's just absolutely it, is that like at the top level you have this kind of, you shoot this an infallibility of umpiring, because actually even if there is a mistake, DRS either corrects it, and if it doesn't, the focus actually just moves on to, well, why did they bail on their reviews, basically? Or occasionally maybe you get a third umpire who makes a bit of a goober, and that becomes a question. If you're a county umpire, you will probably not be as good as the elite panel umpires, because that's why you're not on the elite panel yet, and mistakes do happen. And so, but it is tricky, because if you're a county social media admin, you are trying to talk to your fans rather than to, that you're not, that's your first thought. That your first thought isn't like, oh, that poor umpire is, he's got a lot right in this game. It's like you just want to say the thing that is going to appeal to the emotion of your fan base in that moment. And yes, I do. And I think a lot of the time I look at umpiring and like, I know that I'd be an absolutely terrible umpire, and I look at the decisions they get right, and I'm like, wow, that was good. And we should credit good umpiring decisions more, I think. When there's a good one, it's like, yeah, he's been trapped plumb in front, and that was a really good decision from Kettleborough there.
So we've got a Patreon episode coming out this week on the 1993 Ashes. Extremely fun to do research on, partly because on YouTube, the daily 40-minute highlights that the BBC did are all there. We worked out it's about 20 hours of TV time if you want it. One of the most striking things was, one, how many stinkers there are from the umpires, but two, how the players just don't complain. Like you see an LBW that's stone dead, not given, and he's turn around, that's it. No complaints at all. Like that, there's a clear cultural difference, and I'm sure DRS is a massive part of that. Since DRS has come in, there's an expectation at the elite level that umpiring decisions will be right. Whereas previously, I think it must have been more part of the game where you're like, no, actually, umpire decision is final, and that is just part of the game.
And on players you hadn't seen who were just kind of names in the scorecard, who now you have seen, Peter Such ultra, aren't you? Yes.
Peter Such took 6 for 67 on Test debut on the first day of an Ashes series. Imagine if that happened now.
Wasn't it, is that the Ashes series where everyone was on debut basically? And it was one last week when we had to look up when Sam Cook had the last guy to take the brand new ball in his first innings. It was Martin McCabe, but at the other end was Mark Isler, who was also on debut in an England team with 4 debutants.
I think there were 7 or 8 England debuts across the series. I think Australia used 14 players across the 6 tests. I think England used 24. It was something totally crazy. Anyway,
get that on the Patreon.
Yeah, exactly.
My point.
And as Ben says, quite often you'll just hear on the Patreon just me expressing surprise at a scorecard from about 1998. Like, oh, he played with him? Anyway, that is everything for today. Cheers for coming in, Will. Cheers, Ben. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast that is proudly partnered with Remitly this month. Cheering the teams that we love is what it's all about, and the team we love most fiercely is family. Millions of people around the world trust Remitly to send money safely, quickly and affordably to their loved ones, making sure that more of their money they send reaches back home, because at the end of the day, family matters most. Ready to give Remitly a try? Download the Remitly app today and enjoy a special offer on your first transfer.